help offset some of that. Yeah, glitch loop. Get your wheelbarrows. Yeah, sorry. Well, they were talking about the solar flares creating havoc on the internet. So we'd like to say that it's the solar flares creating some of the glitching you're seeing, but it's likely Elon. Um, Having said that, we were Solomon. We were talking about your electricity, and curious if you are seeing a price increase in your electricity. We know here our electricity in Florida is seeing a 27% increase. Um, Now, I would argue that that's because people are greedy. Corporations are greedy. In the same way, groceries have become more expensive, gasoline has become more expensive, and those companies are making billions in profit above what they were recently making prior to the price increase.
And they take government subsidies.
Yeah.
Why? I have no. Well, I do have an idea. It's graft and corruption and embezzlement.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
yeah, there's no sensible explanation. You can't say, "Oh, it's costing us more to do stuff." Well, then, how is the price increase resulting in billions in quarterly profits above what you used to get, as opposed to offsetting the cost of additional transportation and blah blah blah? So it just doesn't hold water.
But I mean, I've been seeing so many people talking about pumping gas and looking at their bill and saying, thanks, Biden. But I don't understand this because it is the gas companies that are making so much extra money. And I really, after a while, starts to look like just the oil and petroleum industry trying to make things so painful for us, pushing in the idea that it's the president, and then being able to get in a different president who will pass or keep legislation that's more friendly to them.
Yeah, deregulation.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know how they don't see through it. It's just so incredibly obvious.
And it's interesting, we were talking about Reagan a moment ago, and it's been, I would say, proven, but it's certainly been argued that trickle-down economics really doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
So to hold on to that and say, well, we've got to make sure business doesn't pay its fair share because that money trickles down to us. Well, when's the last time you got a pay raise? When's the last time the quarterly billion-dollar profits by the industries has resulted in you getting more money?
Mm-hmm.
Wages haven't changed for, what, 20 years or more?
I mean, at this point, with inflation, given the slow amount of cost of living increases alone, forget raises, right?
Yeah.
For good work and stuff like that. Most of us are making less now than we've made before in the
Yeah,
past.
especially with inflation.
Yeah.
So if your wages are stagnant, but you do deal with inflation,
Oh yeah.
you're not making more money. Even if you get a pay raise, it's only keeping pace potentially with inflation. But to your point, Solomon, house prices are
They've gone
crazy,
like insanity. Houses around here that let's just say right before COVID, okay? This house might have sold for $175,000. It's on a little postage stamp bit of land. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, somewhere around 1,800, 2,000 square feet. That house that would have been 175 in the middle of nowhere kind of ville, right? So it's not even, you can't even say location, is now going for somewhere between 500 and 700,000. I mean, it's, when I look at my students who are graduating, there is no earthly chance, no way, that they can buy a house. I don't even know how they're affording rent. And that, when I was younger, we roomed with people, but if your rent is, $1,700 a month, you've got 3 people living under one roof. It's hard. I mean, it's super hard.
Well, and you can't say, okay, I'm going to make a ton of money, so I'm going to sell my house, because you have to turn around and live somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll get hit by capital gains generally if you don't reinvest that revenue from the sale of your home, so you have to buy another home. So at those prices, unless you get a ton for your house, all you're going to do is basically play the nut and shell game with your living quarters.
There are some places in the United States where housing prices haven't gone crazy. One of them is Ohio, and another is West Virginia. Uh, and I'm so curious. I keep looking into these communities. I'm like, why is this house, this much, this cheap, really? And a friend of mine was saying, you should probably look into unemployment in the area, look at access to medical care, and look at meth, because in a lot of these rural areas, drug use is problematic.
Meth. Yeah. Well, and didn't you recently discover that housing prices, at least in some areas here, were coming back to a normal?
They're supposed to. We've been hearing that with the adjustment of the interest rates by the Fed, that by September we should start to see housing prices come down. But, I mean, you've still got people that are going to be in a pickle. So if they purchased, say, a $600,000 house that's really only worth $175,000, they are so upside down in that house.
Yeah, I think you've got a good point, Solomon, and it makes sense.
And youth care too.
Youth care. 3, aging in place. And so part of that is too that we have to, as human beings, enjoy where we live and not fall prey to the notion that bigger is better, or I've got to have more, I've got to do more, I've got to carve a place in the world. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's a balance and harmony. There are things that you might want and things that you might need, and you have to determine which is the important piece, and then embrace that, I think.
It can be tough. I mean, if you've got a job offer that's far from home, right? Far from wherever your home base is, it's hard to turn that down. And maybe it's your dream and you can really spread your wings and do stuff. But, this notion of not living in multi-generational housing is really new.
Yeah.
I mean, my grandparents lived in multi-generational. Their parents going to nursing homes or do whatever they needed, right? But it's expensive to do that in a lot of ways, not just in money, but you should be taking care of your elder folks. And maybe the best thing is, as you're saying, to not move out of the family home, to continue living there after they go. I've got several friends who are doing just that because it simply makes more sense.
Yeah.
And
well, there is something to be said for being able to grow. If you get a big family, you need space. I understand that.
Yeah, but look, he's like, if you inherit a house with no mortgage.
Yeah, you're right. It would be pretty crazy not to take advantage of that. Think about the finances you could save, the headache in moving.
Yeah, and I have to go back to caregiving. Solomon, you're a caregiver, just like we are. In Florida, we've got a lot of old folk. The other day I was at a store and there was an old man trying to get into my car because he thought it was his car, and I had to help him find his car. And I was having a conversation with him as we were looking for his vehicle, and it took me forever to convince him that this was my vehicle, not his, and that that his key was not broken. I opened my car, I showed him like the stuff in my trunk. I'm like, see, this isn't your stuff, right? This is mine.
There's no diapers back here.
Well, but he was very difficult moving around. We're all unofficial. None of us get paid for this. We don't get taxed. We don't anything. You know?
That's a shortage in the system, and that you are not recognized as a caregiver with any kind of tax break. You're expected to